Good Monday afternoon to you. I hope you had a great weekend. Thanks for joining us on Sports4CLE. Combine week as the NFL will gather in Indianapolis. We will talk plenty of Browns a little later in the show. Brad Ward from Browns Wire, as well as the All Eyes on Cleveland podcast, will join us. He'll give us his blueprint for the offseason and what the Browns need to do getting ready for the 2022 season. We will begin by talking Browns with Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, as well as cleveland.com. But first, we're going to head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about a hot topic, the Browns quarterback.
Yeah, my name is Vernell, longtime Cleveland Browns fan. Listen, I just don't understand this whole Baker apologist thing that y'all do. At the end of the day, this whole thing with Baker is maddening. I mean, we're sitting up here, we spend all this time on a quarterback that is a 60% passer, has only had one successful season as a quarterback with the Cleveland Browns, 4 years in, 3 losing seasons. If you take in the last season without the 2 wins Case Keenum gave us, he was sub 500, even worse. He was 7 and 8 as a starting quarterback. He is who he is. 28-29 for his career. He averages 22 touchdown passes a year, 14 interceptions. If y'all want to continue to keep going on this Baker Mayfield roller coaster ride like he's so great, he did not have a great season in 2019. He had an average season. Did we make the playoffs? No, we didn't. So if we're not going to the playoffs, the guy's going to lose the 3 or 4 years he's been here. At some point, you got to upgrade. You're going to keep riding around in a circle trying to get to a different point. We're not going to get there with Baker Mayfield as our quarterback. It doesn't matter who's in there. He's late on his reads. He doesn't get the ball out when he needs to. He doesn't lead any of his passes. You can keep blaming it on the wide receivers all you want to blame it on. Those are the same guys that everybody glorified when we had our playoff run in 2020. So did the receivers change or did the quarterback? Thank you for the call.
We appreciate all of the voicemails. Let's welcome in Tim Bielik. Tim, again, it's not as simple as first of all, what's the upgrade to? What is the upgrade at quarterback? I agree, quarterback play has to be better. Who's the upgrade?
To me, the only clear upgrades are, trading for Aaron Rodgers, trading for Russell Wilson, and trading for Deshaun Watson. That's basically it. Nothing else seems, perfectly crystal clear. And I've been on record on the show before saying that if you're going to make the move to move on from Baker, you have to know for a fact, not a guess, a fact that the guy you're getting is better. I can't say that about Kirk Cousins. I can't say that about Jimmy Garoppolo. I can't say that about anybody but Rodgers, Wilson, and Watson. That's it as far as clear upgrades. And regardless of who you have there, you also got to improve the operation. You got to have receivers going to make the quarterback's life easier because, this was one of the worst receiver groups in the NFL. A good quarterback can make them better, but you also want to give a good quarterback better weapons to really, make things easier. I mean, Aaron Rodgers has had receiver issues in Green Bay outside of Devontae Adams. If he came to the Browns, it'd be a much worse receiving core than he had in Green Bay, for example. Russ Wilson, same thing. Deshaun Watson, same thing. I mean, if you're going to move on from Baker, it's got to be for the right guy, no question about it. Otherwise, you're spinning your wheels and you're basically ending up in the same place that you've been for the past few years, maybe just a little bit better at the cost of extra assets. If you're going to spend those assets like the Rams did, you better be knowing for a fact you're going to have a great shot to bring home a Lombardi.
The other thing that I would say about the receiving group, about it being the same, was it the same? Jarvis Landry was playing on one leg. Odell Beckham clearly didn't want to be there. And then you get down to Donovan Peoples-Jones. He progressed from year 1 to year 2, didn't make as big of a jump as people would have thought. So in name, the receiving group was the same. In production, they weren't. Everybody thought Beckham was going to have a big year, I myself included. He didn't. Jarvis Landry was playing on 1.5 legs. He wasn't as good as he normally is. So if you don't see the problem with the receiving core, I don't think you're looking. I think you've got the Baker blinders on with that. Baker Mayfield was part of the problem. The receiving core was part of the problem, and I think the scheme was a little bit of the problem.
Yeah, pretty much everything was kind of to blame in what happened last year. And I mean, even if you want to look deeper in the receiving core issues, Donovan Peoples-Jones, yes, he took a step forward, but it wasn't the step everybody expected him to take. It was kind of more after training camp. It was kind of more was expected before camp when, he was going to take a modest step forward, maybe show that he had number 2 ability, and maybe in 2022 or 23 could show be number 1. Anthony Schwartz, I said from day one, this was a 2022 and beyond guy, that you weren't going to be able to get much from him in 2021 outside the occasional deep balls, bubble screens, and jet sweeps, just because of how raw he was, and him being injured in training camp didn't really help him much there.
All right, we're going to take a look. This is from Jason Lockenfora from CBSSports.com, and it's one move that every NFL team should make. And for the Browns, bring in legit competition for Baker Mayfield. Don't mean Case Keenum, who at this age could hold it down for a month or so. Talking about someone who could get you through 3 months if need be. And again, he said, not sure if it's Gardner Minshew, Mitch Trubisky, Marcus Mariota is an upgrade, but I might be inclined to find that out. The thing is I'm not in favor of moving Baker out for one of those guys, but if they're willing to come in and be if Baker doesn't improve, that's who you turn to, I can see that, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, those 3 guys I think are, kind of maybe in a lesser boat of Baker, that Trubisky and Mariota aren't exactly, consistent starter material. I would be curious about Gardner Minshew. I mean, I've met a Gardner Minshew fan since he's come to the league. There's always there's kind of a fun swagger around him, Minshew magic, the mullet, the mustache. He's just a lot of fun, and he put up decent numbers in Jacksonville and Philadelphia. Didn't win a lot of games in Jacksonville, but again, that was with a terrible supporting cast with the Jaguars and the Eagles. He came in. I thought he did a pretty decent job there. Pretty good touchdown to interception ratio. If you need him for a month, I think he can hold things down. If I had to pick between those 3, I'm easily taking Gardner Minshew just because he's younger than those guys, and I think he's shown more than those guys have.
Well, the other 2 were also highly thought of draft picks. One was number 1 overall, one number 2 overall. Well, take a look at this. If you're a Minshew fan and he was your pick, you're not going to like this. This is from NFL Rumors Twitter. The Browns are expected to have an interest in bringing in Marcus Mariota. He's the backup for Derek Carr for competition for Baker Mayfield. Now, when I hear competition, I'm not so sure. I don't know that is exactly what you do with Baker Mayfield based on the year he had and kind of where you saw his confidence at the end of the season. I think you either go with him or you don't. And if you bring somebody in that isn't a clear upgrade, you're probably going to be Baker's backup.
Yeah, and I think Mariota at this point is kind of a backup. I mean, he had all the opportunities to show what he could do in Tennessee. I mean, they drafted him 2nd overall to be the guy that could lead the franchise to tremendous heights, and then he gets benched for Ryan Tannehill, who takes him to the AFC Championship game, and they've been to the playoffs each of the 2 seasons after that. And, Mariota, he just hasn't completed a lot of passes. The magic we saw from him in college just never really transferred into the NFL and didn't really show that ability that he couldn't be able to do those things that he was able to do at Oregon. If you're bringing him in, it's basically as a backup. I don't see him being a guy who can be a starter and carry a team for 2 months, even if you wanted to make him like a Lamar Jackson type. He's a decent runner, but he's not the running quarterback that Lamar Jackson or Kyler Murray are. So that really doesn't work for me. So, I mean, if you were going to bring him in strictly as a backup, or maybe even like spell situations, if you want to have him run zone reads or whatever, just to give the defense a different look once in a while, sure. But I just don't see that as a viable competition for Baker unless you're bringing him in just to, for insurance in case Baker gets hurt or if he has another injury, because he has had some injury problems throughout his short career. But as far as competition for number 1, not seeing it.
All right. Before we go to break, take a quick time out. Let's take a look and go through this. So, Mary Kay Cabot over the weekend had news that the Browns are going to be willing to pay David Njoku double-digit millions that he would get on the open market to keep him. you and I have talked a little bit about this. I get what they're doing. If you sign David Njoku to 10, 11 million, you got to find a way to get him a bunch of targets. He is a mismatch, and you got to give him the opportunity to become one of the elite tight ends if you're going to pay him like that.
Absolutely. And now, I mean, he's shown flashes. I think we can all agree that he's shown plenty of flashes for his career. I've talked before about the game against the Chargers in Week 5 where he was sensational, but he really didn't have much of an impact outside of that. You know, Baker didn't really get him the ball. The Browns really couldn't find a way to create opportunities for Njoku where you're just targeting him. You're just kind of not, maybe force feeding isn't the right word, but you're throwing in the ball a lot, trying to make him a guy that you get the ball in his hands a lot and he could do something with it. It just hasn't happened. And you know what? Paying $10 million is interesting because you're paying on the potential, but you're not necessarily banking on what's there. I think free agency's got to be a little bit of, yeah, you're paying for what you think he can be, but you also got to pay some for what he is and what he's done in the past. That's maybe a smaller percentage, but if you're going by that, I don't know if $10 million is worth it. If that's what it takes to keep him off the free agent market, then sure, at least to keep the continuities there. But then you got to do something with Austin Hooper because I don't know if he could tie up $30+ million into tight ends or whatever it would be to keep those two guys together with Harrison Bryant. So maybe you do that, move on from Austin Hooper after June 1st when you can save some cap money, whatever the case may be. But you really got to be able to manage things if that's the price of keeping David Njoku.
Yeah, the thing I would say is you got to make him a focal point at some point. Not the number one receiver, but a focal point in the passing game, which the Browns haven't done yet. Tim Bielik and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we turn our attention to some wide receivers. We'll also head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back.
Life is getting back on track, and you can too. If you or your family have experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with tuition assistance. Safely get the in-demand degree or training you need with online and on-campus classes. Go to tri-c.edu to check out our programs and resources. So, what are you waiting for? Register now for spring classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Tim Bielik, reporter for the Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. Time for us to head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about one of the mock drafts from Mary Kay Cabot.
Hey, what's up, Dave? Shouting you out for always looking presentable on camera, button up, blazer, and pocket square. Extremely fresh. This voicemail is in reference to Mary Kay Cabot's mock draft when she had the Browns selecting Malik Willis, the quarterback, at our number 13th pick. I love the pick. We have to remember, nowadays, quarterbacks are always overdrafted based on potential. We're not drafting him necessarily to come in and be the day one starter, but we are drafting him based on his developmental potential and possibly being able to push Baker Mayfield if he's ready to be our starter. We can always find receivers in later rounds. And I wanted to bring up the point about the Patriots. If you remember, the Patriots, their number one receivers were tight ends, and they had many successful winning years featuring tight ends as their number one receivers. I believe the Browns are built the same way. We have Njoku, we have Hooper, we have Bryant, three very capable tight ends that we can feature as our number one receivers if we choose to draft receivers who may need time to develop. Think about this. How often is a receiver drafted, comes in and makes an immediate impact? That guy is an immediate star. He's everything that we need to help us get over the top. Hey, I hope you feature my voicemail. Thanks again.
All right, a lot to unpack there. We appreciate all of the voicemails. And Tim, when you look at it, I get where he's going with the tight ends. The Browns' offensive passing scheme just didn't seem to create the opportunities for the receivers. I guess that's the best way I can put it when I talk about throwing to the receivers and the Browns' passing game.
Yeah, I mean, we also have to remember that those New England Patriots had Rob Gronkowski as one of their tight ends for forever. And I mean, I've used the term walking mismatch to describe Traylon Burks from Arkansas, the receiver. Rob Gronkowski is the original walking mismatch because nobody has ever been able to cover him. I mean, he's a Hall of Famer for a reason. When you look at that success, and you always have to always have to caveat everything New England did for 19 years and basically say, yeah, Tom Brady basically did everything because, I mean, it's Tom Brady. He's the best quarterback to ever play the game. But when it comes to Malik Willis, I've said that if you're going to take a quarterback at 13, if you're the Browns, it's got to be either him or Kenny Pickett. I don't think anybody else should really be in consideration because I think those two have the best potential in this draft. And if you're drafting Malik Willis, number one, I don't think he could play him this season. You got to let him sit. You got to let him learn a pro system. You got to let him, work on certain tools that he needs to because he's raw and he's coming from a school in Liberty that's a group of 5 school. He's not used to playing against top-notch talent or with elite talent as well. I mean, there's both caveats going there when it comes to Malik Willis. And 2, if you're drafting him, you got to turn right around and draft some receivers possibly in the second, as early as the second round and in the third round where you have 2 third-round picks. This good news is this is a drafted receiver that's very deep. The Browns can get some very good receivers in day 2 if they choose not to get one in day 1 for whatever reason. Say that pick is traded for a good starting quarterback, or they use that on a defensive end or even another quarterback. They have the ability to use those other picks at receiver, but you got to be able to be willing to spend those early picks to get some pass catchers and get some dynamic players because that's the way the NFL has trended and what we saw in the playoffs. Those guys aren't just luxuries; they're necessities for success. You have to have a guy who's going to be a problem for defenses down the field. You simply need to have that.
Yeah, and right now the Browns really don't. I am intrigued with Malik Willis. Kenny Pickett, not so much. If Willis was there at 13, that would be a very interesting decision for Andrew Berry. I think he's going to go much earlier than that just because quarterbacks are tended to be overdrafted. All right, let's take a look at some wide receiving scouting reports. These are from Dane Brugler, the Athletic, a Northeast Ohio guy, pre-scouting combine scouting reports. And this one is Justin Ross from Clemson at his best. He is a limber, twitchy, athletic, outstanding body control, both as a route runner and at the catch point. As a freshman, he looked like a future top 10 pick in Clemson's 2018 national title run. You see the catches and the touchdowns that he had in 2 playoff games. He's an intriguing guy. You get into the main group that's going to be at the combine that is expected to be first-round type picks, and you see Drake London. Is he healthy enough to work out? Traylon Burks is his second-ranked wide receiver, and his testing should back it up. 225, he's expected to run in the 4.4 range. That 3-cone drill measures agility and cutting ability, and if he goes high in that could push him up even higher. You see Olave, 10.8 100-meter sprint. Dotson, a guy from Penn State that's intriguing as well. Then as we go into that next level, Sky Moore from the Mid-American Conference, great hands, works the middle of the field. He might run in the low 4.4s, which would put him up the board. And Calvin Austin, again, a number of guys. He's a smaller guy, but the speed in the 100 meters. Memphis guy who is a track guy. So a bunch of intriguing guys. All of those guys that we talk about, who do you like? Who do you think fits with what the Browns would do?
There's a lot of ways they can go in that first round. Drake London interests me a little bit. I did a thing for our Football Insiders about how the Browns have been looking for younger players almost exclusively in the last 2 drafts. I look at this receiver class. Drake London is the youngest guy of that group. Of the offensive players, I think in this draft, he's one of the only guys that's under 21 at this particular point. So he'd be a guy I watched just because of youth. He's got an incredible frame. He moves better than a guy who's 6'5". He sticks out. Traylon Burks, I love watching him play. I love watching his highlights. He sticks out because of the physical tools. Garrett Wilson, because of his almost complete ability as a receiver, he sticks out to me. So any of those three guys, I think, for the Browns at 13 would be fantastic. When it comes to the later rounds, I gotta give a shout out to my colleague Dan Lobby. He's kind of sold me on Sky Moore, from his mock drafts and different things like that. He's kind of sold me on Sky a little bit because he's got a lot of great tools. He's fast. He can make some contested catches. We know from past history that MAC players have come into the NFL and done extremely well. So Sky Moore interests me a lot. This is a receiver class that really sticks out with a lot of depth. I've talked about it before that you can go into the third or the fourth round and you're going to find some really good players. It's going to be fascinating this week to see, who kind of steps up, who has a big week, who tests well, not just by running the 40, but who does well in the 3-cone, who's going to jump high and far, who's going to test with strength, who's going to look good in the position drills. All these things matter. It's all pieces of the puzzle. And when you evaluate those workouts, speed used to be the only thing you're talking about. Football's not a straight line game. You got to be able to do everything. And the guys who can do well in those areas are going to make you have to look deeper into the evaluations to see maybe what you missed the first time around. But first round, again, Burks, Wilson, or London, those three guys, I don't know if you can go wrong with any of them.
All right, before we go to break, you had 4 sleepers who could break out in Indianapolis. Take us through those.
Yeah, first off, I got Romeo Doubs out of Nevada. I think he's a guy who's kind of in that mix between day 2 and day 3. He's a pretty big receiver, about 6'2", 200 pounds, back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons for Nevada. There are some hands questions with him, but the athleticism is, no question, a positive in his column. Number 2, I look at James Cook from Georgia. The Georgia Bulldogs are going to send 14 players to the NFL Combine. That is absolutely incredible. And the way Georgia ran its offense, there was never a bell cow back. It was very much by committee. Zamir White, James Cook, sometimes you saw Kendall Milton, Kenny McIntosh in there. They love to play a bunch of different guys. James Cook is not going to be a guy that's going to play power football. He's 5'11", 190 pounds. His game is predicated on speed and space. You get him out in the open field. You get him in the flat. You get him the ball in just open areas and watch him go to work because he's incredibly fast and he is elusive in that open field. So if you're looking for a guy who's going to do those things, that could be a guy to watch in those mid rounds. Number 3, I'm going Chad Mumma, the linebacker from Wyoming. I did couch this in my post a bit by saying I think he's going to go in the second round, but I think he's got, the ability to absolutely have a spectacular combine. This was a guy who was a former defensive back in high school, comes to Wyoming, and he absolutely physically blossomed. 6'2", 242 pounds, and he still moves extremely well. He racks up a bunch of tackles. And if you want to know, all you need to know about Chad Mumma, watch the Senior Bowl. When Malik Willis takes off, he's off going to his right, scrambles back to his left. Chad Mumma comes from the far side of the field and chases him down inside the 10-yard line. Chad Mumma has almost 30 pounds on Malik Willis, and he ran him down to stop him from getting a touchdown. That just tells you the athletic ability that sticks out. And number 4, Tariq Woolen, the corner from UTSA. UTSA is one of the better stories in college football this year. A program that's still relatively new, had a spectacular season, and Woolen had a big part in that. This is a guy who has a unique frame for the position. I mean, he's 6'4", 205 pounds. You don't see that in a lot of corners. This is a guy who has played mostly receiver, moved over from offense to defense, played a corner the last couple of seasons, did a pretty solid job. Still raw at the position, but he's a guy who I think is absolutely going to has the potential to have an absolutely spectacular testing day at the Combine. And that's a defensive back where you usually always see guys put up spectacular numbers in the 40, the 3-cone, the vertical, and the broad jump. This is a guy who could do even better. And I was even seeing a tweet this morning from Tom Pelissero of NFL Network where he was saying that when Woolen was doing his Combine testing, apparently he did the 40-yard dash in 4.2 seconds. That's a Combine record if he does that in Indianapolis, because the old record, John Ross, 4.22. I mean, if Woolen does 4.2, even breaks it, my goodness, you're talking about an otherworldly athlete that just needs to learn the position. But when it comes to pure tools, you're not going to find many other guys with the pure physical tools that Woolen does. You just need to teach him the ins and outs of the position.
All right, names to listen out for this week's Combine. In Indianapolis, we'll have plenty about that as the week goes on. Tim Bielik and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. We'll also hear from Myles Garrett talking about Baker Mayfield. Sports for CLE. Be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com and I continue talking Browns football. We're going to head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about the current Browns team.
I hear all these complaints about Baker and various other complaints. My biggest complaint, thinking about those solid Browns teams of the 80s and early 90s, those teams were physical. Cleveland was always known as a physical team. And I don't see it with this current Browns team. Like you look at Pittsburgh, you can say what you want about their frailties. They're physical. Baltimore is physical. Cleveland used to be. At the moment, they're not. And I think that's the biggest impediment to their forthcoming season. That is my observation. I'm glad you took my call. Thank you very much. Please be safe.
All right, and we appreciate all of the voicemails. Timmy, you know, as I listened to, there's a little bit of truth to what he said. The game has changed from the 80s and 90s to now, but when you put it in the context of the Ravens and the Steelers, they are much more physical, at least on the defensive side of the ball, than the Browns are, and probably on the offensive side of the ball a little bit too. This line is really good. They run a little bit of a different scheme running the ball, though.
Yeah, they do. I mean, we know the zone scheme that O'Callahan has brought to the Browns, and obviously it's worked out very well the past couple of seasons with what Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt and company have been able to do running the football. But, you know, I look at what Baltimore and Pittsburgh have done in the past couple, throughout, you know, the last couple decades, and it's not just they're physical, yes, but they're also physical and fast. I mean, I don't know how good of a football team you could be if you don't have speed. This is a game where, you know, you can't coach speed. And it's a game where, you know, space and speed matter more than they ever have. And you look at the Super Bowl, I mean, the Los Angeles Rams won the Super Bowl without being able to run the football much at all. I mean, the Bengals took that run game away in the Super Bowl, and Matt Stafford and company still found a way to win that game, and they got the defensive stops they needed. So you have to find the balance. It's not just about being physical. You have to be able to run as well. If you can marry the two together, that's the absolute best outcome you can have. But, you know, the game, again, has changed. The athletes have gotten better. There's pluses to both, but I think you got above everything else, you got to be fast. That's the non-negotiable. Physicality is something that, you know, every team's trying to be physical. Every team's trying to be fast. But I feel like you can teach some physicality a little bit. Players can be more motivated to be more physical. You can't motivate players to be faster. That just comes with either you have speed or you don't have speed.
Yeah, and that's, you know, the Browns are definitely trying to upgrade their speed on both sides of the ball. All right, we're going to listen to Myles Garrett talking. He was asked recently about Baker Mayfield. Here's Myles Garrett.
Baker Mayfield, you should have confidence in where you're at with Baker.
What's up, man? I think he's my quarterback. He's my guy. He's stuck by us. I'm going to stick by him.
You think you get to the playoffs next year? You still believe in him, right?
I believe in the Browns.
That's what's up.
And again, you hear all this about, well, he lost the locker. I don't think he lost the locker room. Myles Garrett has shown he's going to say what he truly believes. So when he says that, you know, that's how he feels.
Yeah, I mean, he's sticking up for his quarterback. That's what, you know, all players are going to do. I mean, we all remember the famous Terrell Owens press conference. The whole "that's my quarterback" thing. Take that for whatever it means, whether you believe it's sarcasm, joking, or serious, or whatever from that press conference. But with Miles, again, he's going to say how he feels. I mean, you hit it on the head. I mean, if something's wrong, he's going to say it. But, he's going to stick up for his guy. And these guys have grown together through the organization since Baker came to the league in 2018. They've been the cornerstones of this rebuild, and they were the big reasons why the Browns were able to win a playoff game for the first time since the 1994 season. So, I mean, obviously, Baker's the quarterback right now. Miles is going to stick up for him. Is Baker the quarterback in a few months? Still to be determined. But, right now, it's just it's a player stick up for his quarterback right now. I'm not reading too much into it just because, nobody's been able to make moves yet. And we're just going to have to see how this all plays out. But, is Miles being Miles and supporting his guy? I see nothing wrong with that whatsoever.
Yep. All right. So we're going to continue talking quarterbacks here for the rest of this segment. This is from clutchpoints.com. Best landing spots for Teddy Bridgewater in free agent. 1 was the Saints, 2 the Steelers, 3 was the Browns. Cleveland signing Bridgewater into a 1-year deal act as a wake-up call to the struggling Mayfield. Showing their former number 1 pick will have to earn the starting job. Could be exactly what Mayfield needs. There is also a little bit of the history between Bridgewater and Kevin Stefanski when Bridgewater was with the Vikings a few years back before he went to the Broncos. Having said all that, I don't see it with Teddy Bridgewater.
I mean, I can understand the reasoning behind that move, but I think if you're Teddy Bridgewater, you're signing somewhere to start. You're not signing somewhere to be the backup because Bridgewater, he hasn't been elite in his career, but he's been very solid, consistent. He's not going to win a lot of football games for you, but he's also not going to lose football games for you. That's just the kind of player he is. He's just steady. And I think that's something teams look for in quarterbacks. You want to know what you're getting on a week-to-week basis. And for better or worse, what you're getting in Teddy Bridgewater. So maybe in that regard, maybe it makes sense. But again, I said if you're gonna have someone compete with Baker, you got to have someone in mind who's going to win some football games in case he beats Baker out. I don't know how much higher of a ceiling Bridgewater has than Baker. I think Baker's ceiling is way better, but I think Bridgewater's floor is way better. It just comes down to how much. If he came to the Browns, how much are they going to value consistency over high points? Because the NFL is a 17-game season. It's all about, being consistent, weathering an onslaught of physicality, fast football, 100 miles an hour for 60 minutes. Can you be consistent all the way through? And that's what I think Teddy Bridgewater can do for you. But you also got to be able to have high-level play. So it would be an interesting dynamic. That's what I'm kind of with you. I just don't know if it would kind of happen in Cleveland.
All right, this one about another guy that has been connected to the Browns at quarterback, and it is Kirk Cousins. This is a tweet from Phil Mackey. He is a beat reporter for the Vikings, and it's on the relationship between Mike Zimmer and Kirk Cousins. Zimmer complained openly in coaching meetings about Cousins. Some of Zimmer's top lieutenants echoed the settlement. Didn't make enough winning plays, and he didn't elevate his teammates. Having said that, he's got I believe it's a $45 million cap number, so you'd have to extend him, put on some, you'd have to give a signing bonus, extend him out, spread some voidable years out to bring that cap number down. And the Vikings have changed regimes, so you don't know how they feel about him. Again, I don't know if Kirk Cousins is an upgrade from what we have.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. I mean, I look at Kirk Cousins, he's more steady than Baker. I think I'll put that out there, number one, in fairness to why there's people who like Kirk Cousins to the Browns. He's more consistent. I think, that's pretty obvious. But I think the other thing that we also have to understand is that his numbers have taken a leap since they got Justin Jefferson. And Justin Jefferson is one of the best young receivers in football. You pair him with Adam Thielen, you pair him with Dalvin Cook, and all of a sudden you have a lot of weapons for Kirk Cousins to work with. And those are guys that I've said before, guys like that make a quarterback's life easier when you don't even necessarily need to throw them when they're open. Throw to a spot, and those are guys that can win those tough matchups and make plays. And I don't know how much I feel about coaches throwing quarterbacks under the bus, but it's when you talk about that quote about Zimmer and what he said about Cousins. I mean, I look at Week 4 against the Browns. I mean, Baker played poorly in that game. He gave the Vikings every chance to win that game, and Minnesota couldn't do it. Kirk Cousins couldn't make that play when he needed to. And I think Minnesota even got up to a hot start in that game. They had a really long touchdown drive, and they had pretty much nothing after that. And if you're going to trade for Baker, you need a quarterback who's going to make supremely talented plays that, you know, when everything breaks down, he could still make things happen. It's the thing we saw in the playoffs. Like I said before, if you're going to need those quarterbacks who are going to literally put the team on his back, and I don't think Kirk Cousins is that guy.
Yeah, I think it's not an upgrade. It might be a parallel move, but I don't think it's necessarily an upgrade. Tim Bielik and I are going to take one more time out. Other side of the break, we continue talking Browns. We head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. We'll be right back.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just a mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
We continue talking Browns with Tim Bielik, and we're going to head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about the Browns defense and the quarterback position.
I wanted to comment on the fact that the Browns defense actually late in the year was pretty daggone good. I mean, especially JOK was brought in to chase Lamar down, literally, and he did it. That's what he was brought there for. Now, if we can build that defense up and maybe bring in another quarterback, or, you know, maybe we have to ride out the year with Baker, but maybe keep Njoku and, you know, maybe not spend so much money on that, but shore up the defense and maybe get a few specialized players and stuff like that. We can do a little trickeration, sort of like what the Ravens do, because by no means is Lamar a better passer than Baker. However, he's a much better runner and football player all over. But why not get a guy like that and use him?
Again, we appreciate all the voicemails. Tim, the problem is there aren't too many quarterbacks like Lamar Jackson that and when I say threaten a defense, the defense has to sit there all week and go, how are we going to stop Lamar Jackson? The Browns need more guys like that at the skill positions.
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, Lamar is a very unique quarterback. I don't know if I call him a unicorn type player, but I mean, rarely do you see quarterbacks who move like he does. And his throwing, I will say, has definitely progressed at times in his career. It's been up and down. But, you know, even before the injury, this wasn't a good year for him. I mean, the Sunday night game he played against the Browns was not a good one by any stretch of the imagination. If that's the way you want to go, you got to recognize that that's got a very short shelf life before teams figure that out, before they get the offseason to understand what's going on, to have different ideas for how they can slow you down, how they can stop you. And it's taken some time. And, you know, Lamar was less effective this year. I still think he's very good, but he got hurt a lot by the fact that the Ravens just had nothing around him. And if you have that quarterback, you got to know he's going to be a better passer, because if he's going to be able to run the way he does, and I'm surprised he's been able to be as durable as he is considering the hits he's taken. But if you don't have a guy back there who can throw extremely well, your offense is going to be limited to a large extent, just because you have to be multi-dimensional, and the game is built around having very talented passers.
All right, before we let you go, let's take a look at some more scouting reports, pre-combine from Dane Brugler. This time we're going to take a look at the edge rushers, another area the Browns could potentially tap into with their first-round pick. And this is a guy that a lot of people have talked about. Trayvon Walker, he's ranked 6th overall on Dane Brugler from the athletics board. And you see, he could end up running a 4.5, 8.40. You see the splits, the verticals, the broad jumps, all of those things go with that comp that he's talking about, Rashawn Gary. He could end up really showing out and probably moving out of range of where the Browns would be able to get him if he does those things in the 40 and the splits and the vertical. Another guy is George Karlaftis from Purdue. Speed straight line explosion translated to impressive times in the 40s. 3-cone and short shuttle will be more important because he doesn't have that natural twitch like a lot of the elite edge rushers do. You see a couple of other names to keep an eye on. When you look at edge rushers, do you think that's where the Browns, is there any way you think the Browns go edge rusher at 13?
I think there's always that possibility, especially if they go really heavy at receiver and free agency. I mean, I've said before, this is the edge rusher class is the best position in the draft. It's top heavy and it's deep, which is incredible. And you look at this class, you can go 4 or 5 rounds deep potentially and still find quality edge rushers. They're not going to be positioned to get Aiden Hutchinson or Kayvon Thibodeau, who are the 2 best guys. George Karlaftis and Trayvon Walker would make things interesting if they're available at 13, even if David Ojabo from Michigan is available at 13. I think he's got a chance to test extremely well at the combine. The only question I have with Trayvon Walker is going to be the same question I have with a lot of the Georgia players. They're all great players, but is their success tied to the fact that there's so many of those great players? Maybe I'm reaching for a negative for those guys, but I mean it was an all-time defense. So it's going to take time to really evaluate how good those players are, but you also have to put that under the microscope that, you couldn't pay attention to one guy. You had to pay attention to 7 or 8 guys on that Georgia defense. And I think Trayvon Walker is going to be really good in the pros. I think he's going to be a very talented edge rusher. If he's there at 13, the Browns don't want to go receiver, that'd be a good move. I mean, especially if you don't bring back Jadeveon Clowney. But that would be the only way I would go edge rusher in the first round, is if Clowney doesn't come back and they don't sign someone like Harold Landry. Otherwise, go in the second round, get a guy like Drake Jackson from USC or Myjai Sanders from Cincinnati to fill that edge rusher slot and be the third guy behind Garrett and Clowney. Either way, you're still going to need to draft one pretty high, as at least in the second or third round potentially. But it would be a mistake, I think, for the Browns to not try and invest one of those picks in the first 2 days on an edge rusher.
Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. As always, Tim, man, thanks so much for the time and the insight. Appreciate it very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Have a good day.
All right, Tim Bielik, make sure you read him. Page of the Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. We're going to take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we will be joined by Brad Ward from brownswire.com and the All Eyes on Cleveland podcast. He gives us his blueprint for the Browns offseason. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us.
Life is getting back on track, and you can too. If you or your family have experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with tuition assistance. Safely get the in-demand degree or training you need with online and on-campus classes. Go to tri-c.edu to check out our programs and resources. So, what are you waiting for? Register now for spring classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams. I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
at Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns, and we're going to head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason with a comp for where the Browns are as a team.
Hi. In my opinion, I think that the Rams and the Browns really, really do have a lot in common. You know, both teams started off, hot, when they first started off, but then they had that 1 year where they kind of slipped. And I think that the Browns can really copy what the Rams did in 2020 and this season, and they can have a really, really, really good season for the next 2 years, I think.
All right, we appreciate all the voicemails. Let's welcome in Brad Ward from BrownsWire.com, as well as the All Eyes on Cleveland podcast. Brad, as always, appreciate the time and the insight. I'm not sure the Browns are as far along as the Rams, although the more I think about it, I think the defense was probably a little further along for Los Angeles than the Browns is right now.
Yeah, and it's a different situation. Like the NFL is a copycat league, and a lot of people are going to look at this situation. They're going to look at the Buccaneers situation and say, okay, the all-in plan is the hot plan, right? For the Browns, though, if you listen to Barry, he is very much about sustained success, right? And I think they've been aggressive. I think that they will be opportunistically aggressive when there are situations to get good players that can help them win now. They will do so. I think he's proven he will do that. But they're not going to mortgage the future for now, because the way the roster is built right now, Dave, they don't really have to, right? There's a lot of guys that deserve extensions. And as long as you keep your first and second round picks and hit occasionally on them, you need those rookie deals to offset those extensions in order to keep a roster construction right. And I don't think they want to, I think they have set themselves up for some sustained success once they figure out the quarterback position.
Yeah, I would agree. I can't find fault with much of anything that Andrew Berry has done. And that's not to say everything he's done, it's not realistic to expect a GM to hit on everything. That's just not going to happen as far as free agency.
Right.
And but you understand the plan and you see what the thinking was. And that brings me to my next thing. So you have a blueprint for the offseason and what you think should be done. So take us through this.
Yeah, I mean, we could start on the offensive side. We kind of talked about this last show, and I'm working on an article on this right now. It's going to be kind of long, so I just kind of threw this together here today. But, obviously, we talked about last time I was on, there's not much success, I don't think, in going after a number one type wide receiver in free agency. I think they should use their 13th pick to address that situation. Whoever that guy may be, right? That's up to Barry and those guys, whoever they like as that guy, take him at 13. I think you can fill in around that guy and Donovan Peoples-Jones and Anthony Schwartz with multiple free agent wide receivers. I would say two at the least in free agency that can fill those roles, right? You need a 3, you need a possession guy, you need maybe a slot guy, depending on what happens with Jarvis. We can talk about more about that. But you fill those roles in free agency, and I think there are guys to do that. There are guys I like there for that. Offensive line, they definitely need a swing tackle. They've been willing to spend almost $5-6 million on Chris Hubbard the last few years, Dave, as a swing tackle, and they've needed him, and then he got hurt. I think that is something that they should go out and get a starting caliber swing tackle, pay the money for it, because you may need it with Hubbard and certainly Conklin coming off of an injury, Hubbard coming off a suspect second year.
Yeah, I would agree.
That's kind of the offensive side.
Yeah, and I agree with you. The swing tackle, I think the Chris Hubbard injury is a little bit underrated for how much this offense struggled You had to start Hance and Hudson, and you wouldn't have had to do your fourth and fifths. Hubbard was a competent tackle, and I think that was underrated. All right, now when we switch to the defensive side of the ball, one of the things you mentioned is Clowney. So let's go from there.
Yeah, I mean, that's priority one for me. I think he worked, right? He worked in this defense. It took some time for this defense to gel. I would spend the money that you need to spend. I think there are some cuts that are coming that will free up enough room to go back and get this guy. And he was extremely productive. He played terrific for this defense. And I don't want to break that tandem up. I would like to bring him back. You don't know how another guy's going to fit in. You've seen how he gems and gels with this defense. So I would like to bring him back. He's priority one for me. Obviously, you need a lot of help on the D-line, in my opinion. There's not much on the roster and what's happened with Malik McDowell and things like that. As far as the interior defensive line is going to need addressed via draft and free agency. And I write trades with an asterisk there and get creative because there's not really like a guy that's a huge stud in the draft that you could take at interior D-line where they really need somebody. I mean, I guess you could take a second-round guy depending on who's there. There's a couple guys that might be there, including, the kid from Georgia, the second kid from Georgia. But, they have but I think they should get creative. There's going to be trade opportunities, and this is one of those situations where they're going to have to go out and get at least one real solid piece on the interior part of that defensive line, and they may have to get creative to do it, and I think trades is a possibility there.
All right, we've already mentioned, signing Njoku, Ward, and Clowney priorities. Let me ask you this, and we kind of floated this idea out there when we were going through our ideas for the show. $10 million would roughly be what one of those second-tier wide receivers would do. Does it make more sense to try to renegotiate Landry into that area rather than going out and spending $10 million on a different free agent, if you will?
It's a tough question, man. That's a brutal question. I kind of think that it is. Like, I've been thinking about this since his tweets came out, right? Like, and kind of thinking about and looking at his numbers and his body of work as a whole and what he has meant to this team as a whole. He left the door open to come back, right? I would try to structure it like they did with Conklin, right? Give him the ability to get to 14, 15, 16 million in incentives, but get him down to like 10 and try to bring him back at that number, but say, hey, if you go for 1,000 yards, if you get your 80 catches, what you're going to look for in free agency, if he hits those marks for you, give him that ability to make the money back in incentives, maybe throw a void year on, whatever they need to do cap gymnastics wise to bring him back. But I think it makes more sense for this pass game to have him as a part of it than not and try to replace him.
Yeah, and again, he was planting on a leg and a half pretty much all season. So,
yeah.
He did gut it out, tried to make it go. All right, Brad Ward and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason, plus NFL teams, all 8 NFL moves that all teams should make. We'll be talking Browns when we return. Stay with us.
But if we are to meet our needs, a large part of the answer must come and will come from eliminating the discrimination which deprives us of the full use of the talents of young, non-white Americans.
Zelma George, a former United Nations delegate, answers Johnson's call. As director of the Cleveland Job Corps, she oversees the training of over 12,000 women. Today, the Zelma George Center carries on her tradition of service.
We continue talking Browns with Brad Ward from BrownsWire.com, as well as the All Eyes on Cleveland podcast. We're going to head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about the Browns quarterback.
Consistency is the main criteria of a good and acceptable quarterback play. This inconsistency is the main thing that Baker has yet been not able to establish for whatever reason. so many variables. It's hard, as you know, to pinpoint what's the exact cause, and it's just contributory. But he's had 4 years, and with all the different coaching staffs, with all the injuries, everything involved, it's tough to really evaluate. But seriously, after 4 years, a number one draft pick probably should have shown a little more, even through all the situations.
And Brad Ward, that's kind of a very valid point. You know, it's not an easy answer with Baker Mayfield, but I really don't know who he is as a quarterback. And if you don't know who a guy is after 4 years, that's a little bit of a problem, isn't it?
It is. And I want to preface what I'm going to say with I am just as frustrated by the lack of ability to evaluate him at this point. The ups and downs. I mean, the way I kind of look at it is 2018 good and 19 bad, 20 good, 21 bad, right? So, and he mentions the different factors and the different, variables, and there's a million of them, right? Including different coaching staffs. I would say this. I can't rule out that he isn't the guy. Right? Like, I can't say for sure he's not the guy because I've seen him do it at a really high level for 10 straight games in 2020, right? Or about that. And play at the level that I would expect him to or need him to, right? To earn that extension. I've seen it. I've also seen him play brutally bad. Now, he was injured this year. The offense was stagnant and predictable as opposed to looking like poetry in motion the year before. So there's a lot of, self-reflection, self-scouting that needs to be done on the offensive side of the ball. They need to remake the wide receiver room. But I will bring him back at $18 million, and I got to see it out with him on a healthy arm. And I just don't, weighing that compared to your other options, I still think that's your best option. And I want to say that I'm just as frustrated as every fan out there that wants to run him out of town right now and get somebody new. I just think that's the best option, trying to be reasonable, trying to be fair.
Yeah, I'm not ready to run him out of town, but I understand it's tough because the inconsistency, there are so many variables in an offense. Your quarterback can't really be one of them if you're going to be successful. All right, let's take a look at Bill Barnwell from ESPN. Making NFL offseason moves for all AFC teams. Browns try to take a big swing at quarterback. Unclear whether Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson will be available. Getting one of those guys would be worth 3 first-round picks, is what he says. And, Brad, we've talked about this. That's just not Andrew Berry's style. It's not how they're going to do things. That doesn't say sustained success like we were talking about is, giving away the first round pick the next 3-4 years.
Yeah, man, that would be tough. That's mortgaging the future to do it now. That is that all in right now, especially for a guy like Aaron Rodgers. Maybe not so much Russell Wilson, even though he is getting older, but Aaron Rodgers, who is at the end of his career, kind of, right? And even though he's still playing MVP football, he's not going to play forever. I guess for me, it would make more sense, Dave, if it was like Deshaun Watson, right? But there's just too much going on there right now, like to even take that gamble, and it's not been figured out yet, really. Like, when can he play? What can he do? And the Browns aren't really in a position to waste time and screw around with that. But if he was available, that would be a guy I would say, yeah, that's worth the all-in move because you got a quarterback for the next 10 years. I guess I'm not ready to say with this roster and the talent that it has on it, or I don't think Barry will be ready to say that he's willing to give away 3 first-round picks to just go for it in 1 year.
Yeah, that seems to be counter to what he has shown that he wants to do. Brad Ward, BrownsWire.com, as well as All Eyes on Cleveland podcast. As always, appreciate the time and the insight, and we want to make sure everybody realizes coming later this week, you will have Jake Burns to talk a little bit about the Jack Conklin restructuring and contact, something we didn't get to. But that's coming up on the All Eyes on Cleveland podcast later this week. You'll have Jake Burns. Plenty of really good Browns discussion.
Absolutely. Thanks, David. It's a blast as always.
All right. Appreciate it, as always. Brad Ward, make sure you read him, brownswire.com. All Eyes on Cleveland podcast. They do a really good job. So that'll be coming out a little bit later this week. That'll do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We will see you back here tomorrow, 4 o'clock. Hayden Grove from cleveland.com and the Plain Dealer, and Quincy Carrier are our scheduled guests tomorrow at 4 o'clock on Sports for CLE. We'll see you then. Have a great night, everybody.